Hi everyone, I am Alfonso. I'm an international student from Spain, but I'm currently studying here in Sydney, in Macquarie University.
Traveling has always been a huge part of my life. Since I was a kid, I have loved discovering new places, new cultures, and new ways of seeing the world. Some of my earliest memories are actually from traveling with my family, which is probably why I developed this passion so early. Over the years, that curiosity has only grown stronger. Every trip feels like a new opportunity to learn something different, meet new people, and step outside my comfort zone. Here, you can see me visiting different places around the world, like, for example, diving in the Great Barrier Reef, or walking along the Great Wall of China, visiting the Colosseum in Rome, and seeing the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Each of these experiences has shaped the way I see the world and made me want to keep exploring even more. For me, traveling is not just about taking pictures. It is about understanding different cultures and creating experiences that stay with you for life. Before I go back to Spain, there is one region I would love to visit, that is Southeast Asia. My parents went to Thailand for their honeymoon, and since I was little, they have always told me how magical that trip was. The landscapes, the people, the food, and the atmosphere. Everything sounded incredible. But there is one problem. I am a student, and as a student, my budget is limited. So the real question is not only where do I want to go? The real question is where can I go without taking too much financial risk?
So, if you ever felt unsure about traveling because of money, in this video I'll show you a practical way to make better decisions based on Excel and Monte Carlo simulation.
So to start building the model, I first used a cost of living dataset by country in 2024, which I extracted from Kaggle. This dataset includes several indicators such as the cost of living index, the rent index, groceries index, and restaurant price index. These two I'm not going to be using. These indexes are based on New York as a benchmark, which is set at 100. This means that all other countries are measured relative to New York. So, for example, if a country has a cost of living of 50, this means that it is approximately half as expensive as New York. This makes the dataset very useful for comparing countries, even if we do not have exact prices. For this analysis, I selected a group of countries in Southeast Asia, since that is the region I am most interested in visiting, and also I included Spain and Australia as reference points. To build the model, I first needed to define a set of assumptions, since the dataset is based on relative indexes rather than actual prices. I had to translate those indexes into estimated daily costs. For New York, which is used as the benchmark, I assumed a daily cost of $200 Australian dollars for accommodation, 40 for groceries, and 90 for restaurants. I also assumed a total trip duration of 20 days, which is the amount of days that I want to spend visiting this area. These values are not exact, but they provide a reasonable baseline to work from. Then, using the indexes from the dataset, I scaled these values to estimate equivalent daily costs for each country. This allows me to build a consistent and comparable cost structure across all destinations. So, to estimate the accommodation cost per day of Singapore, I just have to multiply the rent index times the New York daily price estimation that I did and divide it in 100 to get my estimated cost per day for accommodation in Singapore. I did all of this for accommodation, groceries, and restaurant costs for all these countries and then multiply them by the amount of days that I want need to spend traveling.
For me, one of the most important things when planning a trip is uncertainty, because I don't want my wallet to be looking like this. Monte Carlo simulation allows us to model this uncertainty. In my Excel model, each cost component is simulated using a normal distribution. The expected cost is used as the average, and I apply a
15% variation to represent uncertainty. Instead of getting one single result, I'm gonna be generating 1000 possible trip costs for each country. To generate these simulations in Excel, I use a combination of random functions and normal distribution functions. What this formula does is it generates a random value based on normal distribution, where the mean is the expected cost per country and the standard deviation is the estimated cost times the uncertainty. In my case, I set the standard deviation to 15% of the expected value. So instead of always using the same cost, Excel generates slightly different values each time. Sometimes it might be a little bigger, but sometimes that cost can be a little lower, but always within a realistic range. I apply this logic separately to accommodation, then to groceries, and also to restaurants. And then I multiplied it by the number of days that I wanted to spend traveling, which is 20. This gives me one possible total trip cost. By repeating this process 1000 times, I obtain a distribution of possible outcomes. This is what makes Monte Carlo simulation powerful. Instead of one fixed estimate, we get a range of possible results and a better understanding of risk.
Before moving to the visual analysis, I summarize the results of the simulation in this table. Here, each row represents a country, and each column shows a different statistic based on the 1000 simulated outcomes. The average shows the expected total trip cost. Standard deviation measures how much the cost varies, which gives an idea of uncertainty. The minimum and maximum values show the range of possible outcomes. And the probability over budget is the most important one because it tells us how often the total cost exceeds our budget, which is 1000 Australian dollars. Then I also added this column, the desire to visit score. This column shows how much I personally want to visit each country, using a single scale from 1 to 10.
To make these results easier to interpret, I built 4 graphs. The first one is this one, which is an expected 20-day trip cost by country in Australian dollars. As we can see, Singapore, Australia, and Spain are way too over the budget for me. Thailand appears more affordable, as it is only a few dollars above my budget. On the other side, Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia are all below my budget. At first glance, Indonesia seems like the cheapest option. However, average cost alone is not enough to make a decision. That is why I built another graph, the probability of exceeding the $1,000 budget. As we can see here, Singapore, Australia, and Spain all have a 100% probability of exceeding the $1,000 budget. Thailand is particularly interesting. Even though it looked really affordable, it has an 85% chance of exceeding my budget. And we can see here that Malaysia has a 20%, indicating a moderate risk. Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia all have a very low probability of exceeding my budget, since they are all less than 10%. This shows why considering uncertainty is very important. Then I also built an histogram. This histogram shows the distribution of simulated trip costs for Thailand. Each bar represents how often a certain cost occurs. As we can see, most of the outcomes are above my $1,000 budget. This explains why Thailand has such a high probability of exceeding the budget. For the final step, I wanted to include a personal factor. Travel decisions are not only about costs, they are also about preference. In this chart, the horizontal axis represents how much I want to visit each country. The vertical axis represents the probability of exceeding my budget. This allows me to balance desire and financial risk. Thailand is the destination I most want to visit, but it is also very risky. Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia offer a much better balance. Philippines stands out as the best option, as it combines a very high interest with a low cost and very low risk. So, what is the final decision? If I only followed my emotions, I would probably choose Thailand. But based on the data, Thailand is way too risky for my budget. Indonesia and Philippines are the best choices for me because they are affordable, they are safe, and still a destination I would be very excited to visit. The key takeaway is that Monte Carlo simulation helps us make better decisions under uncertainty. Instead of relying on single estimate, we can understand the range of possible outcomes and the associated risk. For a student traveler, this makes planning much more reliable and less stressful.
Thank you very much for watching this video. In this video I used Excel and Monte Carlo simulation to turn a personal decision about traveling into a data-driven decision. You can also apply Monte Carlo simulation to whatever situation in which uncertainty is involved. I hope you loved the video and thank you very much.